Good morning, everyone. If you want to know why I'm holding a microphone and there's no sound coming out of the speaker, there's this guy in black filming the session, and he says he needs this. But I told him that I'm going to be waving my hands, so he may not get the best sound quality. But welcome to the future of me. We may have some late arrivers because there's still a lot of registration going on, but we want to give you just a little bit of context on what this session is all about. This is our clicker, right, Kevin? We love the title because who doesn't want to talk about themselves, right? But this session isn't about the future of me, it's about you. So we're going to get to know you guys a little bit better along the way. But first, let's make sure you know who we are. If you didn't read the boring stuff in the session manual, I know it's hard to tell me and Kevin apart. You know, you might mix us up. Kevin's the one with the ponytail. I'm the one with the forehead, okay? So don't confuse us. Kevin and I have worked together for a number of years. We collaborated in forming a arts district along West Colfax in Lakewood called 40 West Arts. Kevin is an architect, an urban designer, and all-around creative. While my little bio blurb there might sound fancy or boring, depending on your perspective, I'm one of you. Come on in, there's seats in the back, and if we need to bring out some more chairs, we will. I'm a creative first and a business guy second. I made my living writing for a long, long time before I got into some other business ventures. And together, Kevin and I have created something called the Creativity Lab. So the future of me is a product of this nonprofit. The Creativity Lab has 3 different divisions. We have a community design studio. We have a institute leadership. But what today's content is from is we're one of the only organizations in the state and maybe the country that has an incubator specifically for creative enterprises. Come on in, there's plenty of room. If you need a chair, we'll pull another one out. And we work with creatives every single day, creatives and creative enterprises, whether that's an individual, an artist that's just trying to get by, a graphic designer that's hanging a shingle, an interior designer, a fashion designer, that whole suite of creative enterprises and creatives. That's the whole mission behind the Creativity Lab. And we've had great fun over the last couple of years working with Colorado Creative Industries and the creatives in our district, as well as many districts throughout Colorado. What we'd like to know first, before we really dive in, is just a little bit more about you. Tell me raise your hand if you are one of those creatives. You make your living through some creative pursuit or are part of a creative enterprise. Okay, that's about 2/3 of you. That's great. The rest of you, are you part of a creative district? Raise your hand if you're part of a creative district. That's another chunk. How about an economic development or some sort of support component that helps creative enterprises? Okay, I think that about covers everybody. So we're all in the same boat. We're either creatives. I think we're all creative. I think creativity is what makes us human. So we're either making our living, striving to make a better living, or helping others try to do that in a creative district. So it's the perfect group. So let us walk you through a framework. And that sounds kind of fancy or business-like, but trust me, this is going to be more how we talk to each other every single day. So as the title told you, it's about the future of me. And the me in this context is all of us. You know, where are we going with our life? How do we want to piece it together? How do we take small steps to head in that direction? Was it something I said? I don't know. There's a 4-part component to this, and we're going to walk you through that. Come on in. There's seats scattered around. We'd love to have you. There's a seat here, seat back there. So first step, what do we all like to talk about? Our art. Now, don't confuse art with just being an artiste. There's seats if you would like them. There's seats in the back, and we can bring out more chairs if you'd like. We all like to talk about our art. Ask Kevin, poor Kevin. I'm a writer, and if you want to talk about language, structure, syntax, semantics, linguistics, I can fill the airwaves. And he's been kind enough to let me do that from time to time. I love writing, I love the written word, I love to read it, I love to write it, I love to experience it, I love to play with it. Whatever your art is, or your output, your product, your service, that's what we all want to spend our time talking about and doing, right? And that's not scary at all. So the first part of our framework is just your product or your service. Oh, you missed everything. Okay. No, come on in. There's seats scattered around, and if you don't find a chair, we'll bring some more chairs out. All right, the next part, not surprisingly, is as we talk about our art, our product, our service, it's what are we going to do with it? Where are we headed? What are we good at now? What do we need to get better at? Kevin will talk more about his practice, his architecture and urban design, but as a writer, I'm never as good as I want to be. And every artist that I know, and we office out of 40 West Studios, where it's 16 artists in a very creative professional community, all of them are striving to get better and better or learn new things. So my future is the second part of the framework. And I know we're all looking for what's next and how do we get there. And so we're going to work our way through that. Next gets a little businessy, because if you're looking to sustain your future, there's going to be some sort of revenue, even if it's a barter involved, and you're going to have some customers. So how you find those customers, how do you treat those customers, what your relationship is with those customers, how they react to you, and that cycle of communication is key to how it fits in with your art and your future. And then finally, I bet you're expecting something really scary for the last one, like systems and procedures. It's not. It's my purpose. Because we believe, after trying and failing to impose business structure on creatives, we re-engineered how we speak to them in the incubator, not in MBA terms, which we tried the first year or so, but flipping it into this framework. Because just like we all want to talk about our art, our purpose is our passion. And of all the careers that are out there, I think artists and creatives are the ones that probably live and wear their passion on their sleeves the very most. So in this framework of my art, what do I do? What do I love? What do I want to talk about all the time? What do I want to share with you? To where am I heading with this? Can I make a living? I'm doing it part-time now. Can I do it full-time? Or I'm already full-time, how do I get to the next level? And where are my customers? Where do I find them? How do I communicate with them? How do I price my product, my service, my art? And then how do I live this life in an authentic way so that I'm true to my purpose and every day is truly an experience? Come on in. I bet you there's a seat somewhere. Is there an empty seat? So let me ask you before we move on, anything scary about this? Any of this not ring true? I mean, I'm open to where we've missed the mark. Isn't this how we interact every day with each other, with other creatives, with our friends and our family, talking about our art, our future? Hey, I sold a piece. Hey, I got another gig. And man, I'd sure love to do this all the time. I have lots of stories to tell, but we only have an hour and a half, right? And we want to make this more about you. Well, I'm going to take you to the first quadrant here. So since nobody challenged our framework, Kevin, we can move forward. So we're very open. So if you see a hole, let us know, because I bet you we can fill it. All right. Oh, on the table, you're going to see a little worksheet. You don't have to do it. There's no quiz, although don't be surprised if you get called on. I'm a former teacher. 35 years ago, I taught English and journalism. Not surprising. But this is the framework that we talked about in the conference registration guide. Follow along, use it as a guide, jot down it. And if you don't have one, we have a few extras up here. And if you don't worry about getting it just right today, we're going to put this on the Creativity Lab website. We're at creativitylabcolorado.org, creativitylabcolorado.org, and on our resources link, this will be up there probably by tomorrow morning. It's up already? That's that ponytail. It gets things done. So it's already there. You can download it and do it again later. But it's there for you if you want to follow along as part of where we're heading. Now, no cheating and moving ahead. That's no fun for the teacher or the presenter. So let's drill in. So we're gonna do a drill down into each of these quadrants. Feel free to use your worksheet along the way, and ask questions if something confuses you. So let's start with your art, our art, my art in this context. So remember, what did we say our art was? That's our output. That's our product. Sure, it funnels our passion and our creativity, but in this framework, we're talking about how do we make this part of our livelihood. So if you think about any other product or service, you've got to figure out how to describe it. And if you are a traditional visual artist in any form, whether you're a painter, a photographer, illustrator, or whether you're a graphic designer, that whole spectrum, I'll run out of examples. We invite you to think about how do you describe yourself and your work and what makes you different. In fact, we think each of us have our superpowers. In the old days, I used to call this the secret sauce. What's the secret sauce for your business, for your product, for your service? But today, everything's about superheroes, right? Well, I think we all have a little superhero in us, and it should channel through our art. So as you think about what you do, you don't want to be a Me Too artist or business where you're just like everybody else. Oh, I'm a photographer, I take pictures. How boring is that? I don't think I've ever said those words in my life, because every photographer I know, they have some special way they approach or have some area of speciality. So think about how you would describe what you do and 2 or 3 reasons on how you do, on what you do and how it's unique. For instance, it could be your approach to your art or your service. It could be your use of color, style, content. And I'm going to give you 2 quick examples before we move on. So in my past, I've owned a publishing company, sold that, and I owned a PR firm and sold that. When I was in publishing, we positioned our company right in the sweet spot where other publishers didn't want to be. We were looking for first-time authors. And if you know anything about the publishing industry, 0.1% of authors ever even get their manuscript looked at, let alone published. And 35 years ago, I worked for a global publisher called Harcourt Brace. And so we positioned our company as welcoming the first-time author. And we would take first-time authors through a free training workshop on how the publishing world works. That was our gift to them, and whether they picked us or we picked them or not. And we only published about 3 or 4 books a year, but it opened the gates and made us welcoming to that community, to the clientele that we were looking for. Quick flip side, moves into the 90s. I ran a PR firm that focused primarily on technology. And we invented a process called the business first approach. Because PR is PR. You know, you're trying to get people in the news and in magazines and the news, et cetera. And believe it or not, I started the PR business before the internet, and the internet came about right in the midst. So it was good fun in transition. But we introduced the business first approach in how we engage our clients. And it had to do with a cycle of engagement, and I won't bore you with that, but it was our secret sauce. So that when somebody engaged us, they knew there was going to be a process, and we were going to take them through it. And of course, what we said is that ensures our success with you. So as you think about your art, think about others that are like you, that are in a similar space, and think about how you're different, and what your approach is, and how you could articulate that. Now, we could do a whole hour and a half just on messaging, but give that some thought. Play with it. Bounce it off friends and family. Compare it with others that are in a similar field, but find a way to reflect your superpower to the world. That's the first step in the future of me. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Kevin. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So let's move on to the second quadrant, my future. You know, that's one way of thinking about that. It's all about current state and future state, assessing where you're at, taking the rose-colored glasses off maybe sometimes and looking really at your current state, and then dreaming and thinking about where do you want to be, where do you want to go. So a couple of other little caricatures here. You know, maybe you're a part-time project manager here, part-time accountant, part-time barista, part-time UPS driver, whatever it is. You know, plug in your current state there, and then, you know, envision what does it look like in terms of your art, how much time you're putting into it. So another question for the room, how many would consider themselves a part-time artist? About half, third to a half. How many would consider themselves a full-time artist? Oh, a lot. Great, wonderful, cool. Trick question, you can vote twice. How many people would consider themselves an overtime artist? I've got a full-time job and I put all my energy into my art. Yeah, exactly. That definitely is the world I come in. I try to channel my passion into this, into my architecture business, and I love spending every moment connecting with people through both mediums. So take that current state and future state and start to put some edges around it, start to put some goals around it, right? And challenge yourself to make them revenue and time driven, right? So put a dollar sign on whatever it is, next month, next week, next year. What does it look like? How does it support you? Clients, maybe there's a metric in terms of clients. Sorry, I'm getting blinded there. You know, assess, again, your current state. Do you have returning customers? Do you know about them? Think about the future. How many new customers would you like to have? What is that great show you'd like to be in, that great gallery you'd like to be placed in, that great store you want to be on, the great online music venue that you'd like to be part of? Maybe if you're in a certain world, again, bring whatever your world is into here and try to put some numbers, some edges around it. You know, maybe that's exhibitions, maybe that's gigs if you're a performer, maybe it's projects if you come from my world or the graphic design world or kind of the for-hire design world. But challenge yourself to put a little bit around the edges of what that is. So a quick touch there. We're going to keep building this out in different ways, different examples of how it might connect to your world. Let's move on to my customers. We talked a little bit about that in the quadrant above, that we all need people to connect with our art, right? As Bill said when we started, that's why we're all kind of in this business, right? It's personally fulfilling, but we all get great joy when we connect with other people through our art or our creativity. So we'll pull back with an analogy a little bit here and open your mind to this, and hopefully there'll be a way for you to see yourself somewhere in this spectrum. So we're calling this the creative entrepreneur spectrum, you know, and we've got Charlie over here and Molly. So let's talk about Charlie. Let me show you Charlie here. You know, he carves wooden ducks. You know, he's all about the summertime festivals. He does a great job making sure he's placed. He's busy every weekend. He sells really well. His product is cash. There's no good and bad about it. There's no judgment around this spectrum. I'm just trying to create a little snapshot of people, an amalgamation of people that I know. And they move on. You know, everybody's happy. Charlie's happy. Kids love the ducks. Parents are happy. Everything's good. From an entrepreneurship lens, let's look at it a little bit different way. You know, the duck goes home. The kids are playing with it. The neighbor's friends come over. They're in love with it. They don't. The weekend festival has moved on. They don't know where to find Charlie. Friends don't get their duck. Charlie doesn't get another sale. You know, might there be another way? Is there another way to think about it? In this setting your metrics, maybe pull out of yourself, pull into other roles where you aren't necessarily the seller but the buyer, and lacking maybe in making that connection point of, hey, I wanted to be able to refer somebody, I wanted somebody else to experience this, but I don't know how to find that cool person that I encountered or that cool product. So we'll look at Molly at the other extreme. Again, kind of a hybridized version of some people who've come through the incubator at the Creativity Lab. You know, maybe she's a part-time school teacher looking to pivot into a full-time business, but she's got a different way of thinking about it. So let's pretend she's a jeweler, and she deals with earrings. She's very conscious about what her price point is and how she's connecting with people. And I just kind of threw a quasi-demographic term right at it. I don't know exactly what a new bohemian earring looks like, but let's say that's a market, right? Where does it go from there? Well, she's really conscious of what kind of store, what kind of vibe, what kind of places people are shopping, and she connects with other stores in other districts, in other areas, in other states, in other cities, in other towns that has a similar vibe. She works with those store owners to collect data. She partners with really smart entrepreneurs who are trying to connect with their customers as well, and they're happy to share their databases. They have email sign-up sheets. They do their own special shows for all their artists and all the people they're carrying, and she gets that information and starts to use it strategically. We can bunny trail this a little bit more, Bill. I'd actually like to open this up right after this. You know, one example is she takes those email lists, hosts invitation event only collection events, and targets a little bit higher price point. She starts to broaden her spectrum a little bit, think a little bit different about only being restricted to volume, but maybe thinking about quality, and really get some true believers in the room and have them more one-to-one. That's the way I connect with the pieces of art I buy. I love the piece of art, but I love connecting with the artists and the artists' stories as much. That's what brings me joy when I look at the piece on the wall or on my wrist or whatever it is. I'm about connecting with the personalities behind it. That's what I love. So another quote from a song there, right? Good golly, Miss Molly. It's totally opposite end of the spectrum. How cool is that? You know, Bill, again, this is kind of an amalgamation. What are some of the other ways that we've seen a Molly type think about broadening a product offering?
Well, it's a longer conversation. We're going to touch on this just for a moment. More about how many different ways. Come on in. Oh, you're just peeking. Okay. How many different ways can you sell your work? Can you only sell your originals? Can you sell reprints or prints, or can you license it? If you're a writer like I was in the old days, can I write a piece and repackage it and resell it? There's copyrights and intellectual property discussions, but there's also a discussion of the sales cycle. Is that where we're heading next?
No, not quite yet.
Not quite yet? So that whole notion of how many different ways can you sell your product is key.
So that's exactly. I mean, all this discussion, these two people, maybe they're a little bit relatable from these, you know, kind of worlds, but if you distill it down, what we're talking about are customers and connecting with them. You know, communication, how are you doing that? Not through just the transaction, but setting up the transaction, after the transaction, everything like that. And then beyond that, you know, demand, marketing. How are you placed in the world, and how are people finding you, and how are you differentiating? So that's it getting a little, you know, more, a little, we're layering in some kind of, many of you can probably see the MBA, the business corollaries to all this world, but I like to keep bringing us back to the touchstone of This is how we operate in the world every day. We all need things, we all exist in the world, we all connect, we all transact, we all exchange energy and barter in lots of other ways. It's the reminder to me when we're talking about this among the creative and artist community is don't let that MBA side of it be scary and intimidating and you know, my own history as well, kind of putting up that mental barrier to it just because of the language, because we do this in different ways every day. So Bill?
All right, you're going to scare them with that slide, but actually back up one click. Before we get there, now that you kind of see where we're heading. So do you see yourself in Charlie or Molly just a little bit? I mean, we've all been Charlie, where we just want to revel in the joy of what we do. Oh my God, somebody's giving me money for doing what I love, and it's cash. I can spend it. That's a thrill. And Molly's a little more of a planner, thinking through her business model a little bit. But what I will tell you, as flip to the next slide, what is it that makes a customer a customer? What is it? Anybody know? They purchase something, right? Mm-hmm. There's a transaction. So I've given some seminars on just the sales process before, and I promise that's not where we're headed. I just want to give you a general hint of what is a universally accepted sales process that can be mapped to any product or service. And if you think about this, awareness, consideration, trial, and purchase is well documented and is very much the discussion in ad agencies, and Madison Avenue makes billions of dollars in moving people through that process. And what I would ask you is, as you think about some of the questions that Kevin proposed, you know, how do you create demand for your product or service? And how do you communicate with your customers, or do you? Are you Charlie or are you Molly? Or somewhere in between? But think about this for the next minute or so, is awareness, consideration, trial, and purchase. People can't buy what they don't know. That's a given. If I don't know your art exists, or that your photography service exists, or your architecture practice exists, I can't hire you. So there's ways to get over that awareness hurdle. The way our brains work is there's going to be a period of time that we go through consideration and trial before we make a decision. Now, I'll give you an example. We probably all, I guess we all either own a car or have owned a car. You know, you may be a very thorough researcher for your automotive purchases. You read Consumer Report, you talk to your friends and neighbors, and then you go to the dealership and you drive some and try them out. That could take 30 days or more, but you're walking yourself through, hey, I know I like Jeeps, and I'm going to read about them. I'm going to learn all I can, and then I drove my brother's Jeep, and I liked it, and I'm going to go to the dealership. And in 30 days, you make a decision, you buy yourself a Jeep. I have a Jeep, I like Jeeps. But if it's a box of cereal, you may walk into the cereal aisle, see the 122 choices, and go, well, I know I've liked this before, I'm going to get the same thing. Or my workout buddy said, try Total, it's healthy. You can work through that cycle, that sales process, in 30 seconds. The thing that I want you to remember about this is our job as creatives is how do we move people through that cycle? In fancy terms, we used to say, how do we move friction from the sales process? But it's just how do we help people get through? So what Kevin and I did is we said, well, how does that really map in language that might be more in line with creatives? And while sometimes language is imprecise, I'd like to offer this to you and think about how this maps to your creative output. So publicity is just this broad term for exposure. And there's really no magic arrow or magic bullet in all of this. Publicity and exposure, taken from a former public relations guy and writer, it's work. You got to get out there. And there's some things you can do, or you might have some things that others can help you with. But that publicity piece, that exposure piece, whether you have a blog where you share your passion and people follow you, whether you do public speaking and go out into your community and do demos, or donate some of your work from time to time just to help a good cause. There's unlimited ways to get exposure, both small and large. And in the old days, people said, well, how do I get on Oprah? That's what everybody wanted in the book business. If Oprah reviewed your book, you'd be a bestseller. Well, not everybody can get on Oprah. Oprah doesn't have a show anymore, I know. I'm showing my age. Remember, I'm the forehead, he's the ponytail. But there's lots of ways. And you can find a way that's uniquely yours, but what you can't do and move through that cycle is not do anything and just say, oh, I'm going to just focus on my work, people will find me because it's going to be great. That's probably not the best way to remove friction from the sales cycle. So think about publicity, exposure, all the different ways that you can get out there. Sometimes it's joining forces. If any of you are, traditional artists, part of a co-op gallery, that co-op, that collaboration helps raise everyone's exposure. And whether it is you're trying to get into that next gallery or that next tier of gallery, or if you're a writer, get into that national publication rather than the local publication, it's just a matter of working the system and finding ways to get known. There's a whole lot there, and as a guy that used to do this for companies and individuals, but I'd invite you to talk to your peers and see what's working for them. But there's a variety of ways. You can be a guest columnist about whatever your particular area of expertise is, but anything that gets your name and your work out there. In the creative world, packaging might sound a little weird. And I'm not talking about shrink wrapped or turtle wraps or things like that. I'm talking about how do you package your work, your portfolio, so that others can consume it. Do you have a good example of your work online? If you're a creative and you use Etsy, or you have your own website, or you have some other shared shopping environment, is it a good representation of who and what you are today as a creative? But more importantly, because not everyone is that visual artist hanging in a gallery waiting for somebody to buy their piece. If you're a graphic designer, most often you're going to have to find people that need what you do, qualify them, and end up with some sort of proposal. Even if you're a public artist, and we work with a lot of public artists doing large-scale installations, there's going to be RFQs and RFPs that how you package your portfolio, and if we go all the way back to the first quadrant, my art, how you explain who you are and what you do, what your superpower is, that's going to get that committee's attention, because you're going to be a little different. But packaging is key. So as you work through the exposure component, so people know who you are, or there's some level of awareness, and then how you package and put yourself out there, your portfolio, testimonials, recommendations. If you in any way work in the public realm, get letters of recommendation that you can scan and post on your website, or include with your portfolio, and certainly include with any proposal that you submit. Because as you walk through that cycle, it's relatively difficult for someone to try out a new piece of art that doesn't exist yet, but they can see your existing work, right? So your proposal has to be a way that gets them through that consideration and trial component for them to make a decision to purchase. So there's a lot more to discuss here, but understanding that bottom half of the arrow, that generic universal awareness, consideration, trial, and purchase, and knowing that it takes different amounts of time for different products or services, and different people attack it in different ways, but how we react to that as the artist, as the creative, is important. So think in terms of publicity or exposure, how you gather your work and share who you are, and then deliver it in allowing people to make a decision. Because in any sales or any transaction, it's got to get down to a yes or no, a buy or not buy. And whether it's a proposal for a new urban design of a master plan development or a piece that I want to write for the New Yorker, I've got to give them a chance to say yes or no. And you have to be fearless when it comes to that. So publicity or exposure, packaging, proposal leads to a purchase. And yes, they're all P's. There's going to be more P's coming up. So I'm going to turn this back over in just a second to Kevin, but let's give us one click. I think we're going to take a quick step back. So I don't know how often you think about the sales process and what we just talked about, but I think about it every day. Not because I'm selling my work, but I want to help others sell their work and expand their business, whether they're an eclectic collectible gallery in our district, which we have called the Gallery of Everything. And believe me, if you go in it, it has everything you can imagine. Or the latest artist that moved into our district. If we go back to that first step of being able to understand how you talk about your art and yourself in a unique way, that superpower or that secret sauce. And then, as Kevin explained, looking at where are you today and where do you want to be in the future. And put a time frame to that. I think we've all heard that if you write something down, you're 10 times more likely to do it. You've heard that before. Do you know if you add in parentheses after that a time frame or metric that measures it, you're then 4 times more likely to complete it. So as you're staring at your worksheet, whether you write on it now or you write on it later, think about those 1 or 2 or 3 things that you might want to change in your current circumstance. Kevin mentioned clients or output, but it could be something you want to learn. I want to get better at encaustic. I want to get better at processing black and white film. I mean, I wish I could do that. I don't know how to do that. And write that stuff down, and then right after that, in parentheses, put by when. It'll help you. I can tell you from firsthand, it makes a difference. And then that whole spectrum of Charlie versus Molly, and understanding that it's up to us to create demand. And in the whole realm of sales, do you know what your closest next sale is? It's from an existing customer. So whether you're a professional services, writing in many ways is a professional service. Kevin is a professional service. Graphic design in many ways is a professional service. If you're a graphic designer or a photographer, your closest next sale is to talk to your existing clients. They already know you, they've bought from you, they know the quality of your work, and they might just have another project. The next closest sale is a referral. So that's why those recommendations and testimonials are important. But for all of us, I believe, it comes down to wanting to live our purpose, to be authentic to who we are. I have lots of really horrible stories about my first half of my life. Up until 35 or 40, and I'm about to be 60 soon, I was just chasing the dollar, thinking that was the way, that's what you had to do. This is America. You gotta, money makes a difference. And I was never really driven by money, but I thought that was important. It wasn't until I pivoted and said, you know what? I'm just gonna do what I love. And you know what? I'll probably never starve. And from about 40 on, the next 20 years have been so much more joyful. And I think you all are already there. I saw the hands go up. You're either in your field, part-time or full-time, or helping others. Living that purpose and that authenticity is what we all wish for everyone, don't we? So as you're there, Kevin's going to walk you through something that might seem a little scary, but then he's got a surprise for you thereafter. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Kevin.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was a perfect snapshot of where we've been. So under my purpose, there's a lot of things that can live here, but in this future of me, this kind of creative notion of how to start to think about yourself as a business, we put some numbers and some metrics out there, right? So the do the math portion is important. You all said you're part-time, you're full-time artists. You're connecting to your financial being and your financial responsibilities to your family, yourself, and others. So at some point, embrace it. And this is self-talk as much as I'm just trying to share my advice, because it took me a long time to do this. And one of the keys I used was kind of acknowledging that math was just another language. You know, I speak Japanese not that well, good enough for a restaurant, and I kind of speak math in the same kind of category, enough to be fluent, enough to survive and get what my needs are, you know, just like when I'm in a restaurant. But I hope you all have developed some facility with it, because bear with me as we go through this example. So just take $10,000, right? We live in the world of money in units. I like to also think about this as energy. I mentioned that before. It's an exchange of energy in the creative realm. So embrace it. Think about it in terms of some of those units that we put up in that second quadrant. You know, 50 creative units, whatever that is. Think about your world and say you value that at $200. That's at $10,000. You know, if that extreme, if either of those kind of metrics, you know, I can't produce 50 or 200 isn't what the duck that I carve. You know, maybe it's more, well, a $50 duck may be a little expensive too, but, you know, maybe it looks more like this. You know, maybe it's 200 creative units at $50 a piece. Just trying to show a spectrum, get some kind of fluency with it and flow, because I'll show you in a couple more stops here where I'm headed with this. So add a zero, scale it. Think about that future state, whatever it is. I'm going to use an example here that is literally add the zero, but then reflect it back on your creative unit. And you know, the math exercises I find interesting and enlightening, so that's why I wanted to share it with you. So take those same 50 units. You know, I understand that as my creative capacity. I can do that. I understand it, you know, at 200 levels, it gets me to 10,000. Well, $2,000 is what it takes if my goal is $100,000. You know, is that possible? And you know, the add a zero is kind of obviously inflects this to a point where you ask those questions. What will the world compensate me for whatever my creative unit is? Or the reverse capacity question. You know, if I can produce 500 of those creative units, I don't have to drift my price point. Can I embrace other ways of doing my art? Can I license it? Can I think about other ways about that creative unit beyond just maybe the effort that I'm putting into it? You know, I'm very much the same way. I'm less about the technical drawings in my current practice and more about the process and the design process and the generative sketches that can serve anybody in the future. But that's my creative unit, and it has its, you know, scalability limits in there. I'm a finite human, like we all are. I can only do so much of that, but it comes out of my brain, like I'm sure it does out of so many of your creative endeavors. Again, just running that math the other way. Nothing big, nothing complicated here. You know, it's those 200 units at the 500 if you're coming from that world, or 2,000 units at that same $50 level. Again, just playing with the numbers, looking at the different questions, asking how do those goals map to my ability to fulfill whatever the need is, whatever my ambition is. Well, one of the things that we'll build out for here, that Bill and I have embraced, is this idea of looking at yourself even more broadly. So these all happen to add up to 100,000 in $20,000 increments, but think about it maybe beyond your creative unit as it exists now and look at it in other ways. And maybe understanding that there are extremes here, maybe it's bracketed in your world, but you know, maybe you can get one big chunk if you can raise your worth in the world, energy exchange in the world to that $20,000. Or maybe it's more like a $2 postcard and a $20 tote, print of a tote, and it comes from a series that I'm selling in a gallery of paintings at $200, and maybe I'm getting a few commission pieces at $2,000. Perhaps think about the ability to broaden the application of your creativity into other mediums. We had some fascinating conversations with some of the studio artists who, you know, embracing all kinds of new creative connections with creative makers and creative producers, getting their They're prints put on silk scarves, you know, for the higher, you know, it's not like a t-shirt or a tote print. You know, it's very much fashion forward. You know, there's lots of creative outlets and collaborators that can come together and help you here. You have any thoughts?
So before you head on, sometimes you can look at all these numbers and go, what the heck? And I know on your worksheet there's this little simple formula, put this number in your target and break it all down and do the math. I'd invite you to think about this a little differently than just pure mathematics. Think about the numbers serving you.
Yeah.
This is input to your purpose, right? So figure out what it is that it's going to take. The notion of your creative output unit, I'll just give you an example. When I was a writer full-time, I was always looking for where's the next $1,000. Where am I going to make the next $1,000? What will I have to sell? What will I have to write? What can I repackage? And as Kevin shares those different configurations of, you know, $2 times 10,000 or 10 times 2,000, you know, I might write a piece for $1,500 that would go to some regional magazine, and I'd repackage that and sell it locally for, you know, somewhat less of that. Think about what you do and how many different ways you can sell it. And that's where I think the math becomes a service to you. Okay, yes, if someone hires me for an art commission and I charge them $2,000 or $5,000, that's a great gig. And if you're trying to make $100 grand a year, you can do the math. That's what you need to do. But if you look at it in these components, are there more? Do you have more than one way to make money? Because then you can hit different price points and you have different segments of the market, different people that can buy. So now I know we're thinking more like business people, but it's our creative output. And if you can sell it in multiple ways, the numbers will serve you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a great example, Bill. So maybe this is for me as much as for the rest of you. Heavy breath. We dealt with the numbers. Every time I sit down and deal with my books and reflect on it, I need a breath. So a little bit broader, bigger paradigm. I'm really interested in all of you connecting as much as you can with your inner self Bill story from the last 20 years. How do you use all that creative being, creative energy to put what you want into the world and make the world a better place? So this is one section, you know, how can I be compensated? How can I make a living? Of a bigger concept that I was introduced to maybe in my 20s. I've come back to it on and off intensively. You know, it's a Japanese word, ikigai, or ikigai. You don't want to be that icky guy, right? And the notion is that everybody has it, and it's at the core of your being. It's your passion. It's how you change the world. It's why you're here, right? And there's a self-discovery, self-reflexive part of it, and we're all works in progress, right? I've used this on and off, come back in different times in my life, had different things in different bubbles, had repeated concepts and overlapping words in some of them, and I'll share with you where I think I'm at now, just as an exposure to this tool. And if it's helpful, please take it with you and use it as often you want. Put it on your refrigerator wall, use it as your screensaver. It's been a fun touchstone for me to think about my creative life through this concept. So this is a repeat of that, just in my little Prezi version here. You know, those 4 outside circles, you know, the idea here is bring this all together to work for you, like we've been talking along other ways. Can I make a living out of it? You know, are you good at it? Kind of important. Do you love it? And does the world need it? And you can see how these two, the Venn diagram, how the pieces overlap, right? If you can be compensated for it and the world needs it, there's a vocation. You know, if you can be compensated for it and you're good at it, there's a profession and kind of training aspect that you need to be able to you know, have on your business card. This is kind of a business card metric for me. You know, I'm an architect, you know, and in your world, there are probably these high-level paradigms, again, before you figure out your secret sauce. That's kind of the label that the rest of the world understands, you know, that's your kind of social currency that everybody understands your basic come from. But the rest of this builds out in a lot of ways that first quadrant did. What's your specific come from? What's different about what the way, that's just one part of you, that label. What are all the other things you bring to it? So, you know, if you're good at it and you love it, that's narrowing in pretty quickly on what burns in your soul to get out, what's your passion. And the change the world notion over there, you know, if the world needs it and you love it, it's going to spark and start a whole process. So if any of you have seen some of the other talks Bill and I are done, we bring a lot of our conversation back to this notion of authenticity. So for me, I use that as synonymous with this Ikigai term. You know, what is your authenticity? What's your core values? How are you living it every day? So Bill, you'll have to hold me accountable here. Call me out if if my self-image is not accurate. But sorry, I keep drifting in front of you. I know. Let me just show you how this lives in my world. And again, I tweaked it last night. I've tweaked it several times. I walked through this with some young STEM students a couple of weeks ago and had some different thoughts about it. This is definitely iterative. It's definitely not a life map the way I live it. It's just a touchstone and a way for me to kind of reflect. So, you know, my entry into the world, my mom loves to tell the story that, you know, when I was very young, I was trying to do still lifes with crayons on the kitchen table. You know, that very much resonated with my self-image. You know, pretty early on, while I was in high school even, this notion of architect, you know, aptitudes to all this stuff kind of gets into it. I didn't ever feel comfortable with math, actually, but there were some racial stereotypes probably going on there. People felt like I was, but I love the art and drawing just as much, and people did kind of nudge me that way. So I took that cue, and it has served me well. I actually appreciate that. I had some amazing mentors along the way. And at this point, I've kind of distilled as what was I doing? You know, that's what differentiates profession from vocation. And for me, it's that training versus innate. So for me, I put architecture over here because there was a lot of technical stuff I had to learn. You have to learn a certain way of drawing to communicate. It is about designing volumes rather than, you know, something on a paper that I was familiar with. And then there's codes and there are other things that I had to learn. You know, it was very much training for me. So for me, you know, it lives over there. And as I went through that process, what I discovered was it was about visual thinking and communication. As you can tell from these prezzies, I'm actually much more comfortable communicating over drawings than. That's why Bill and I have such a great partnership with Facility with Words. We really riff off of each other because I definitely live in a pictures world in my head, and when I try to communicate with you all today. So I started, you know, kind of using some terms more loosely or even inventing them. It's a real word you just don't see very often. So I call myself a visualist as well, because that's my come from. That's how I communicate with the world. You know, as I moved on through my architecture career, I actually didn't, you know, had dual words for a while here. And then maybe in the last 10 years, I've kind of figured out a different overlay that's been an undercurrent of my work. I've always been interested, in how cool the building is and how cool the space is, but how it connects with the bigger fabric, the community design aspect. I have urban designer on my professional card now. And its ability to nurture and sustain was actually what was driving me. So again, kind of an unusual invented word in some ways. What I live there now is I'm an urbanist. You know, that's a little bit different for me. It is what's innate. That's part of my come from. That's part of my secret sauce. That's the overlay to the practice of architecture. It's in an urban way, and that doesn't mean it has to be in the city. For me, it just means, is it connecting with the things around it in an appropriate way? And it helped me fill out a little bit of that you know, 4-year-old box, which the kind of drawing that I actually realized that I loved was the diagramming and the essence. I wasn't, you know, really good at having the patience even of working that drawing to kind of its realism or that point. I was actually in the process of distilling and looking at what's underneath. I love botanical sketches. I love, you know, the extras on DVDs now. I'm just tickled pink because I love seeing the production design side of it. I love the formative nature of how that all works. So, you know, bringing that together into how it works with, sorry. No worries. Thanks to Andy back there. No, not for that, but for his help. We're borrowing his laptop. Strategist, how does that all put forward in the world and change things and help it? That's the critical part of what I can bring to it. Again, it's not. My practice now isn't involved in the mechanics of getting all the drawings done as it's for those of you in the development world and kind of some of those geeky terms, the entitlement phase, the due diligence phase, all these upfront things that actually set up a piece of land to be on the arc for where it needs to be involves more strategy for me than technical drawings. Let's go hire a civil engineer. Yeah, we're going to need some technical stuff, but public meetings, setting it up for success, it all very much involves how drawings and visual communication set up a endeavor for success. So that's how I look at it. What lives in the authenticity, the terms I use now, creativity, and I stumbled on this cool word, ideation. It's a form of idea, and I live in my foot is in both of these worlds of the creativity lab with Bill and my architecture urban design practice, which is ideate design, and it's been a fun process in that I actually do visualization work for artists. I work a lot with the creative community. It's much more than a platform for me as architecture, and the cool thing that we use in the lab and that my creative friends use when they come to talk to me about a project is I need ideation or help me ideate, and that's been really fulfilling to me because I feel like it's finally starting to come together for me the same way Bill has described his last 20 years. I'm starting to understand how to focus it and to bring it into service on all those three bubbles. So just wanted to share that with you. Those little bubbles are on your sheet. You can, there's plenty of other examples of how that's been, people have used it. It's been a tribute in Okinawa to longevity, if you can channel this right. But thanks for letting me share that with you all. I appreciate it. So back on track. A little digression there to try to make this not in the not scary, but this really is for us about all of us as creative beings, holistic beings, and trying to bring it together. This one, that one being a little bit more broad and holistic, and how are you bringing it all together? Our quadrant, Future of Me here, is a little bit more focused on your professional track and how it serves your financial needs. That example of Ikigai is how to put you in the center of all this and make it the driver, the engine, the thing that spins in the middle, the gravitational force that keeps all of these things in orbit. So a quick run around the quadrant, just some other terms that may feel familiar in terms of my art. That is all about positioning. That's what do you do and how do you connect with the rest of the world. So for me, that's a little bit different than an artist statement. An artist statement can be important to define yourself, how you think about your art. But this positioning in my art, start to pivot that a little bit more and think about how the rest of the world, how you want the rest of the world to perceive it. What are those three things you want the rest of the world to know about your come from? You have anything else on that one?
No,
Okay.
keep
Let me
going.
keep going.
I might have something at the end of this.
Okay. So my future, setting those goals, setting those metrics, picking those tangible things, that's very much about process, finding your own process about how to get there. Pipeline, a little bit more of the marketing term. This is a little bit deep dive. Bill introduced you to that notion of the sales cycle. That's a truism that we go through, on almost any decision we make on the consumer end of things, and how to make that work for you. How do you make your pipeline, connecting with people, customers, communication, demand, putting that all into a leverageable format that you're willing to invest in. Some of this, and build this out a little bit more, is the notion of you may come up with a list here in the things that need to happen. Hey, I know in the publicity aspect, I get it. Blogging would be a great platform for me. I'm not very good at it. Maybe that's a point where either you hire or collaborate with somebody else. For me, there's a self-inventory aspect here of the things to get to that sale of, am I willing to do it, or am I willing to get help on it, or even hire for it? And again, that passion lives in that last category. It's about your purpose, it's about your passion. There is the down and dirty math part of it, but that's really where it's gonna flower.
So I'm gonna take a half step back to take our next step forward. Kevin introduced me to the Ikigai concept. And I've thought in terms of Venn diagrams almost my whole life, whether it's family, relationships, business. It's like, where is the overlap? Don't we all think that way? And aren't we all in the process of becoming? Wherever we are in our life, whether we're still in school, getting our degree, out of school, or trying to age gracefully like me, we're all still trying to become. We're all looking at what's next. Mm-hmm. And I found that Ikigai construct inspirational, kind of speaking to life in a 360 view. And I think that's when life is our most fulfilling. Is yes, you got to make a living, but you want to do what you love. All of us want to be recognized for being good at something. I mean, all the research tells us that recognition is more powerful than money. If somebody praises you or recognizes your work, you feel great. Money's great too, but the research says recognition is a stronger motivator than money bonuses. So being able to recognize that through this Japanese construct of Ikigai moved me and helped me kind of look at my life. And I have a number of different Ikigai graphics because I think we're all multidimensional. So it might not be the same all the time as yours has evolved. And then as Kevin has moved us through these 4 quadrants again, we talked about positioning your product. How are you different? How can you articulate your superpower to the world? Being honest with yourself in where are you today and where do you want to be? And what is it going to take to get there? Kevin brought up a point that I wanted to reinforce both on the process and on my customer's side, the process and pipeline, is we're all not good at everything. Shocking, right? There's lots of things I'm really horrible at. And I've got to be honest with myself. If you're not going to, if we go back to that sales process and you're not good at or won't do the publicity part for yourself, you might have to hire it out. And that doesn't mean you spend tens of thousands. You could, but you might find somebody that needs something that you're good at, and they can help you with publicity or promotions or exposure, and you can help them with visualizing or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. But you have to be honest with yourself. But you also have to accept that there is a sales process, and how can you influence that by what you do or what help you can bring to your business. And then as we wrap up, one last thing about, it's interesting that all the numbers are in the passion and my purpose quadrant, right? In order for that to be sustainable, there's got to be fuel and energy in the tank to move you forward. And I know for those of you that come out of more of a business world or somewhere that you have more mature businesses, well, wait a minute, what about expenses and what about income and the disposition of the two? That's a given. You can't spend more than you make unless you have a trust fund. So that part of the math, we consciously just sidestepped. If you know what you want to make and you put that target number, by and large, you know your expenses. Now, as we strongly encourage you to have your business registered in an entity like an LLC or a corporation of some sort, and have a business bank account, and actually have a set of books and financials. But typically, if we start the conversation like that, most of you will fall asleep or half of you will leave. So we believe in all that, and all that's a given. But for us, it's about connecting with the heart and letting passion drive us. Because in that, I think what we called them was passion-driven profits. Right. If you do what you love and you just put your heart into it and connect with some of the frameworks here, good things will happen.
So the sneaky here, It is all about the future of me. If you've answered and are engaging all these questions, you're on your way to a business plan, right? There is a deeper dive on a lot of this. We've touched on a high level, but it's tried to take the scary out of it. We, in the incubator, have had a series of conversations, and it did feel like skid marks. We were talking about this in a way that was so unfamiliar, so intimidating and scary that we tried to boil it down to some simple questions that are really internal and have to do with connecting with the world. And there's a business side to those if you want to make a living. So, Bill,
this is just a reminder. On that fourth quadrant, Kevin and I both mentioned about evaluating your output, your creativity, your art, your product or service, in how many different ways can you sell it? I've seen a lot of artists and creatives have aha moments when they go, wow, I could do that. I don't know about licensing. I'm going to put that on my things to do list, on my future. I'm going to learn if there's something that I can license from the images that I create. Or I'm going to create a postcard series from my photography, and I'm going to sell it in my creative district. And while there's a cost associated with creation, I'm going to test market it first to see if they move, and then I'm going to make sure I mass produce the ones that sell the most. Now, we just made a giant leap. We talked about test marketing and things of that nature, but think about what you do and how many different ways you can sell it and package it. There is a Future of Me version 2.0 in the works that is a little deeper dive and spends a whole lot more time on this piece. But as we look at the, what's next, Kevin? Is it
just the back to the quadrants.
So as we look at this framework, I hope you see some simplicity in that. And we want to take a few minutes now and see what resonates, what doesn't. I know I'm inspired as I've looked around. There's a lot of you with worksheets that are just filled out from top to bottom. That's super cool. And I love it. Well, we're happy to take some questions on any of these quadrants. I'd love to start just for a minute or two and just see if anybody wants to share. Let's start with my art. And this was the positioning component, the secret sauce, the superhero. Oh, this is your opportunity. Okay. Make a break for it. They did not want to get picked, I can tell. Would anyone like to share what your secret sauce or what your superpower is and what you might put in that quadrant? Come on, be brave. All right, let's start right here.
So I'm a cellist and multi-instrumentalist, and one of the things that I think sets what I do apart, I guess the rest of that field really, is that I started.
Just say you're a cellist, right?
Yes.
Let's just start again.
Okay. I'm a cellist.
We're recording, yeah.
It's for the camera. Yeah. So, as a musician, there's a lot of traditional spaces to play in, and there are a lot of people looking to play in those spaces. So it's a pretty saturated market. And one of the things that I started doing was presenting music in non-traditional spaces. So I've played on an island in a river while the audience was on the bank of the river. I've presented music while as a solo artist and also with a group of mine, three musicians, actually up in like a changing aspen grove, so elevated off the ground, 10 or 12 feet with everybody down below, or like in a cave or something like that. And I've found that much like finding a way that's unique, that allows my music to resonate with the audience at a different level as opposed to during a traditional presentation at a venue.
Very interesting. So see what he's done. While he's still playing the cello, he's creating the experience in a unique way. And all of us all of us want to have new, exciting, and interesting experiences. That's one of the things we're focused on in our district, this whole notion of immersive theater and immersive experiences. How can we deliver art, creativity, and culture in different and unique ways? And that's just like finding different ways to deliver your product in a different way to get more people interested. And you can consider that, publicity or exposure, or more ways to be hired to deliver an experience. Very interesting. There was one over here.
So I'm a poet, so I don't expect to make any money as a poet, but so my life's work now is to increase people's chance encounters with poetry. So that's my new life's work. And so I do the same thing as James. I just did an installation at the Loveland Museum. It was a poetry installation. There were 6 writing stations, really rich writing stations, 3 for kids, 1 on bees, 1 about Thoreau, and 40 people came and spent 3 hours writing poetry at the museum. I collaborate with artists. I was in a gallery, and there were 300 people that read 4 of my poems, more than anyone that has read my work in print. So that's my new thing.
Great.
That is super exciting, super exciting. As a closet poet myself, I applaud you. So I see there's a whole lot more hands up. I don't think I can get the mic to you, but I'll do one more right here, and then we'll see how much more time we have.
I'm a mosaic artist, and I also teach. One of my challenges is that people, they appreciate the mosaics, but they don't know what to do with them. It's like, well, you hang them on the wall like you do an oil painting. But I have found that I do love teaching, and my group is basically entry level, and then building on that and offering other classes. And I'm living in a creative community in Paonia. So there's a lot of artists there, so I'm trying to figure out how to deliver something to them that they would come and attend a class. So I started working with mixed media to have, build something in slab clay with ceramics, and then incorporate the mosaics at the end of it, because it's all about the experience. I'm really into experiences myself. So, yeah.
Great.
Great. I think about it. If you developed a specific expertise, there's another revenue stream there. You can teach it, you can give lessons, or you can offer experiences. I know a clay artist that she makes amazing clay things, clay sculptures, everything from bowls to you name it. But she'll package a clay experience for $8 and sell that for $2,500, where a family or friends or a pre-wedding party where they come, they just want to do something together, and they end up leaving with a piece of art, but they get to experience it together. She's making almost as much money from those experiences as she is from her art now. So whether you teach, give lessons, or give experience, that's another way to add revenue streams. I know there were more hands, but I want to get, how are we on time?
We've got 15 minutes.
Okay. I want to try to touch on a couple of other quadrants. If we have some more time, we'll come back to this. Is there anybody that's brave enough to share one of their goals or one of their, current state, future state changes that they jotted down?
Oh, we got
All right, we're gonna figure out our way to get to you. Let's see.
Yeah, you're good.
I think it'll reach. I think it'll reach.
My name is Joshua Goss. I'm a local Greeley artist. I'm a sculptor. I have a master's degree in fine art. My sculpture is based on geological processes as an analog to metalworking process, so a lot of heat and pressure, different things like that. I currently sell sculpture. I'm a full-time artist, working with consultants and galleries and things like that. My thing that I've been trying to do for the last couple years is try to break into the public art, larger scale work. I find that extremely difficult. It's very competitive. I have one of the trees along the main street here. That's my goal. And to make more money.
Well, that's a great goal, and your unique positioning, I think, is clever too. And I know you had your hand up for the first quadrant, so that was clever in the way he's positioned his art. I'm going to tell you this: pick up one of my cards. We do lots of public art in our district, and I guarantee you I can find an opportunity for you. Come, it might not be your most profitable one, but I'll find you an opportunity to be a public artist. But thank you for sharing in wanting to do that. Anybody else? Anybody else in that want to share a goal? Let's go all the way. Is there somebody over here too? Let's hear, and then I'm going to go over there. Then we're going to move on.
All right. So my name's Matt Ite. I'm a Steamboat Springs photographer. I've been there for 11 years. I have another day job as well. But I've got over 2 terabytes of photography, and generally I sell my photography to the person who commissioned it. So I need you to go and do this event. I need, family lifestyle photography, or I need real estate photography, or I need marketing photography, whatever the case may be. Over 11 years, I've generated around 2 terabytes, around 250,000 individual photographs, and I've started to realize that what I need to be doing is taking this area of photography, and whether it be a Smug Mug account or Instagram, Pinterest, whatever, but I need to make it accessible to resell it. And so that's kind of where I am, where people have been commissioning me to do work, and that's great because it pays the bills in the short term, but where I would like to get is to resell it, like you're saying.
Love it. Thank you.
Great. That gets into that whole intellectual property, copyright. It's important to get your arms around that so you can protect your rights long term. I'm going to try to get to you over there, okay? I don't know if it'll make it, but let's try.
It's about your limit.
All right. I think that's as far as it's going to go.
Okay, great. I'm a painter, and I do vision board workshops for creatives, actually to help them figure out their future dreams and kind of expand on how they're thinking now. So when I did that for myself, I found out that I've already been showing my work in galleries here in the country, but I wanted to show my work in Latin American countries. And so this was a whole new thing, very exciting idea, worked it over in my mind. And as often happens when we get more clarity on a dream for a future, is things start lining up. So I was recently invited to a birthday party at a hacienda on the Yucatan, which I don't know how I'm going to pay for, but I'm going to go, by a well-known sculptor in Mexico City. So I have my first chance to go and spend 3 days with this amazing group of people and start making those connections to make that happen. So exciting.
Fantastic. Let's give her a round of applause for that. Kevin, we have, about 5 or 6 minutes left?
Yeah, it's 11:20.
All right. I'm blinded, first of all. Just kind of open it up to general questions. Anything in any of the 4 quadrants of the framework where you have a question, or we confused you, or we weren't clear, or if you have a comment, we'll do 5 or 6 minutes to just open questions or comments. All right, stand up and talk real loud.
You guys did a great job, but I'm actually curious about your creativity lab, Colorado. Could you just tell us a little more about how it's structured, classes, or series that will work for you, or how do you guys structure what you do?
Sure. We did not plant her in the crowd. Very short. The Creativity Lab was an offshoot that was created by demand. Having worked through community organizing and the political process of forming a creative district in what was a dramatically economically challenged area, a lot of people wanted to know how we did that. And so through Colorado Creative Industries and a lot of the other communities throughout the state wanted to talk to us, so we had to create some sort of organization to allow that to happen that made sense. So the Creativity Lab and the distillation of what we learned became the platform for how we serve others.
So it started in that institute quadrant. Actually, maybe 3 of these sessions ago in the back of a room in a seminar. Bill and I started brainstorming about the conversations and requests we were getting, and they had a lot to do around, we have a concept called the 10 principles there. It's very much organizational development for creative districts. So that's the first kernel that started, and then we started bringing these others in orbit, again based on backyard needs that we were seeing. The studio was born out of connecting artists. We have Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design in our backyard. You know, that kind of person connecting young artists with portfolio building projects to small businesses who had you know, needs and small budgets. So trying to make the right match there. Bill, you want to talk about the incubator a little bit?
Yes, so we had these 3 areas of need. You know, a community design studio that takes the strength of visual communication and removes the unknown from where people want to get, whether it's branding, packaging, or facades for a main street. So being able to visualize that, and some of the things that Kevin's really good at, and some of the folks that he mentors. The incubator was something we had been working on forever. I'm a product of an incubator in Silicon Valley where I was a part of a couple of startups, but nobody does an incubator for creative enterprises because there's not that many creative enterprises that scale to $100 million and make venture capital type returns. But they're just as important, and small business drives our country, so we wanted to add that service. So between the Institute, which helps communities and kind of teaches what Kevin mentioned, the 10 community readiness principles, which was the distillation of what we learned in our community, we've shared with others. Those 3 components became the platform for this 501c3 that folks can engage. We're also looking for other communities that would like to be satellite offices where we would share that complete know-how. And we're just in the process of setting up what that would look like. So I don't know if that answers your question. I don't want to take up too much time talking about us, but if you visit us online at creativitylabcolorado.org, you can learn a little bit about how we were formed and who we are and what these different pieces are. It really is our way of giving back. I hope that some of your takeaway of today is you can tell that we're really into this. We believe in it. We live and breathe it. It's who we are as people. And the Creativity Lab is a manifestation of at least that part of our being. We still need to make money in doing other things, but being able to give back and serve creatives and creative communities is important to us. Yes, ma'am. Maybe this should be the future of us.
I was just wondering, how can I stay in touch with you and maybe get more information from you, because it's pretty helpful to me. And it seems like you might have service.
We would be delighted to help any community or set of creatives that think this could be useful. Because clearly this is an hour-and-a-half session. We kind of covered it at a high level, even though we went around the horn 3 times. There's lots and lots more to talk about in more detail. Please pick up a card, or you can reach us through our website. We're happy to receive your call or get an email, and we'd be delighted to stay in touch.
Yep. You know, if you explore the website a little bit, you'll actually see some forms that dial in on a series of questions that might answer how can we help you? Are you a good candidate for the incubator or things like that? So yeah, definitely check it out, please.
All right, we'll do one last question before we do a wrap. Who's got that last burning question? Come on, is it you?
That's not a question, I just want to say about the fantastic logo.
I didn't hear.
Well, thank you. Fantastic logo. We got a compliment.
Oh, you like our logo?
That
Well, you
came
know,
out-
if you call yourself the Creativity Lab, you can't be too ordinary. And we worked at it. And we played with a lot of different things. But when we landed on this, it just spoke to us. For me, because it's got that little hint of the nib of the fountain pen, and as a writer, I said, how can that be wrong? And you don't know this about Kevin, but Kevin loves fountain pens. So it fit for us.
All my white shirts that I've lost show that.
It spoke to us personally. But thanks for saying so. We like it, and it seems to serve its purpose, and that's what matters. I will take one last question, because there's 3.5 minutes left. Okay.
How about Amazon for art? If we could find a way to sell art outside of the small community and galleries and jurors, like, is there a place for decorators to go look for art, or, I mean, make it bigger? What? Do they have a lot of art selling on it? I know there's Etsy, there's Pinterest, but those are like overwhelming.
Sounds like we could give a seminar with what folks know about where other places are where you can go to sell art. I can't say we're experts on that, but hang around and talk to your peers. I bet you there's lots of possibilities. Well, let us just do a wrap here so we can end on time. First, we want to say thank you for coming to our session. This is meaningful to us on many levels, professionally, but also personally, and as that 360 whole person. We really believe that this framework and working through that is the path forward. And we think that having tried other ways in teaching what we've learned, because Kevin and I both started a number of other businesses separately, and I've sold a few businesses. I was very fortunate. I've also crashed and burned a few. But making the business process more accessible to the creatives that maybe didn't go to business school or didn't pay attention in business classes. We think this framework is a way to live that purpose-filled life and to build your future so that the future of me is accessible to everyone. So thank you for being here today. Come and visit us if you'd like, but much appreciated.
I have nothing to say. Thanks.
And I think we ended
2 minutes
1 minute
early.
early.
Wow.